Good evening, everyone, and welcome to lesson number 5 of our meditation from Sinai course, Mind Your Business, Reframing the Routine. So before we jump into tonight's lesson, I want to recap the past few weeks, and I want to mention an important point that I do not believe that I mentioned before. And that is the fundamental principle that we've been discussing in all of these lessons is really actually the fundamental and core principle of Hasidic philosophy. If you want to know what is the definition of Hasidic philosophy, it's pretty much what we're talking about. It's a one-liner, but we've been dividing it into 2 ideas and 2 points. And those ideas are, number 1, God is within everything, and number 2, God is within every moment. This is an idea that I have mentioned many times, and I will continue to mention. You'll probably hear it from me at least a dozen times tonight. Key principle, core idea of this course, which is, again, God is in everything, right? And God is in every moment. We have so far done 2 meditations that emphasized these 2 ideas. Number 1, you could call a divine space meditation. The second one, a divine time meditation. What were those meditations? Number 1 is the principle that God is within everything, which just means that the divine energy, right, the life force, flows through everything and is within creation, right? Just like as there's a body and there's a soul, just as the soul gives life to the body, so too God gives life to all of the universe. Just as the soul represents the true value to the body, so too the soul represents the true value of the universe. When we recognize, when we focus, when we internalize the idea that God is within everything, this helps us prioritize where we should be spending our time and our energy, right? On that which really is the most valuable, which of course is the soul. In addition to that, recognizing that God is within everything, we never feel alone because God is always with us. We feel that connection, which brings confidence, which brings joy, which recognizes that there's meaning and purpose to every circumstance and situation. The second point that we've been talking about is the concept of divine time, right? That God is within every single moment. There is a divine energy that is continuously and constantly recreating the world, brand new, absolutely fresh at every single moment. What does that teach us? It helps us tune into the power and the purpose of each moment. Every single moment was literally handcrafted by God for you to be able to accomplish something. Tuning into this allows us to live the most mindful way and to truly be fully present in the moment because we value the power, the potential, the meaning of every single moment. We're going to take these 2 ideas, that God is within everything and that God is within every moment, a step even further. This principle that God is within everything and that God is within every moment, what that means really on a practical level is there is no human activity that is devoid of purpose, of meaning, of spirituality, of godliness. Every activity, even the most mundane, the most material, the most basic activity, is an opportunity to connect and to experience God and the divine in the most optimal way. Now, intuitively, we feel and connect to God doing religious activities, doing spiritual things, Torah study, mitzvahs, prayer. These are things that to us naturally are divine, right? They're naturally spiritual. These are naturally godly and holy activities. But when it comes to the physical and the material, naturally, we see these things as being anything but divine, anything but spiritual, anything but holy. Because of that, right, there are many people, many cultures, religions, that to them, their definition of holiness, their definition of somebody living a spiritual life is abstaining from the physical. Now that takes many forms, depending on the religion and depending on the culture. but the idea that the physical and material is a distraction, that it takes you away from that which is spiritual, and that the only way to achieve true spirituality is to remove yourself as far as you can from the material, is an idea that actually does make sense. There is some logic to it. However, Judaism absolutely and 100% disagrees. Because what's the fundamental principle? God is within everything, and God is within every moment, which means any activity, no matter how mundane, can be a completely, totally holy, spiritual, godly activity. However, in order to experience it, to experience the godliness, the holiness within that mundane, that requires us to be in the right framework, the right attitude, the right mindset, and so on. So what are we going to do today? We are going to try to change our everyday routine, our physical, material, mundane experience from something which is shallow, something which is just material, something which is external, something which relates just to the body, to be something which is much more mindful, much deeper, much more soulful, much more meaningful. We are going to explore three areas: eating, sleeping, and working. Another way of saying it is we are going to explore the kitchen, the bedroom, and the boardroom. So, point number one, the concept and the idea that we have the ability to find spirituality within the mundane and the ordinary is actually a very basic Jewish idea. It's even a fundamental Jewish principle. Unfortunately, so many people are not aware. Like oftentimes when interacting with a person who is not that knowledgeable, right, not that immersed in Torah, they think of Jewish life, especially Jewish law, as being very rules and regulations oriented. Do this, don't do that. Not very spiritual. However, as we're going to see, nothing can be further from the truth. We'll begin with text number 1a, which is on page 148. Debbie, if you wouldn't mind starting off, and we'll do 1a and 1b, but we'll start with 1a, page 148, please.
Okay, yes. So Jewish mindfulness, change your life. In previous lessons, we explored spiritual ideas.
Read from where it says text 1a on the bottom there, not the introductory paragraph.
Got it. Okay. Know God everywhere. Know God in all your ways, and he will direct your paths.
So here we have a very clear biblical verse. The biblical verse says, know God in all your ways, right? Emphasis on the word here, all. It does not say, know God in meditating on a mountain. It doesn't say, know God through a prayer, through Torah study. That's not what it says. It says, know God in all your ways, including the mundane, are opportunities to know God. Just as you would describe prayer as an opportunity to know God, so too any of the normal everyday activities we do is also an opportunity to know God. If you could continue, Debbie, with text number 1b, the next page.
Yes. A fundamental principle. Bar Kapara taught, which is a brief passage upon which all fundamental principles of Torah are dependent. Know God in all your ways, and he will direct your paths.
Here we have a Talmudic statement that tells us that what is the most fundamental principle you want to boil all of Judaism down to? He says, know God in all your ways. And this really does fly in the face of conventional wisdom, because conventional wisdom tells you that what is religion about? Religion is about doing holy things. It's about doing religious things. Things that are not in the category of holy and religious things would not be in the category of religion, would not seem to be in the category of knowing God. Yet what does Judaism say? Know God in all your ways. There is divine energy in everything. There's divine energy in every time. Therefore, anything we do and at every moment, we can absolutely be holy people. Let's go to text number 2. Stephanie, would you like to read text number 2 on page 150?
I would love to if I can figure out my Zoom. There we go. Okay, text 2. We should direct our hearts and the totality of our behavior to one goal, becoming aware of God, blessed be He. The way we rest, rise, and converse should all be directed to this end. For example, when involved in business dealings or while working for a wage, we should not think solely of amassing wealth. Rather, we should engage in such activities for the sake of being in a position to obtain that which our body needs: food, drink, shelter, and a spouse. Then, when we eat, drink, or engage in intimate relations, we should not intend to do these things solely for pleasure, to the point that we eat and drink only that which is sweet and tasty, and we engage in intimacy for pleasure. Rather, we should focus our minds while eating and drinking on the exclusive benefit of maintaining a fully healthy body. Therefore, we should not eat whatever the palate desires, which would put us on par with animals, but rather we should select foods that are beneficial for the body, whether they are bitter or sweet. And we should avoid substances that are harmful to the body, even if they taste delicious.
So the Rambam says a person should dedicate their life, of course, to knowing God. The Rambam doesn't then say, therefore, the only thing you should do is mitzvahs. Because you have to know God in everything you do, all day long do mitzvahs. That's not what he says. The Rambam says that no matter what you do, and in everything you do, whether it's business, eating, drinking, intimacy, etc., everything that you engage in, you have the opportunity to know God in all of your ways. We have the ability to raise the level of the experience that we're doing from mundane to holiness. So there's a great story of a quite well-known chassid. His name was Rabbi Binyamin Kletzker. He was a wealthy person, right? He was a wood merchant, lumber merchant. He had a large business enterprise. And there was a foreman person who worked for him, who had a lot of responsibility in the company. And from time to time, he had to consult with Rabbi Binyamin Kletzker on very important business decisions. A lot of money was on the line. A lot of employees, what they had to do was on the line. And he'd knock on the door. And oftentimes, Rabbi Binyamin Kletzker was studying. He was studying Hasidic philosophy. He was meditating. He was learning. And he simply was not available. One particular day, there was a pressing issue. He knocks on the door, no response. He looks through the window, and Binyamin Kletzker, the boss, the owner of the company, lost in thought, lost in meditation, studying Torah, is not available. 1 hour goes by, 2 hours go by, 3 hours go by. This is going on again and again and again. The guy's pulling his hair out. There's a work that has to be done. There's decisions that have to be made. No one's doing anything. 5 hours go by, 5 hours. Finally, he gets the attention of Rabbi Binyamin Kletzker, and he starts asking him the question, and he says, I'm sorry, and Rabbi Binyamin Kletzker says to the foreman, I'm sorry, but I am not available at the moment, right? My mind is in the Torah that I'm studying. Please come back soon, and I'll be ready for you. Comes back a little while later, and he says to boss, I do not understand you. An entire day we wasted. An entire day of work, critical things had to be done, and wasted because your mind was wandering off. So Rabbi Binyamin Kletzker said to his foreman, says, I don't understand why you are so frustrated and upset and bothered by it. When a person sits in the synagogue, when a person sits in shul, and they're praying to God, and their mind wanders, it could wander to business, it could wander to sports, it could wander to family, the mind wanders. Is anyone surprised? Is anyone shocked that a person's mind wandered from prayer to the material? He says, why is it such a shock that in the middle of business, my mind wanders and drifts off to spirituality? Why is that a shock? So it's not a shock when in prayer your mind wanders, but somehow it's supposed to be a shock when your mind wanders from business, right, to spirituality. When the story was told to the Rebbe Rashab, right, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, he said, this is the idea of know God in all your ways to the fullest extent. That in the middle of a person's most mundane activities, right, it's imbued, right, with spirituality in the most profound way. How do we get there? How do we get to such a state where does our mind wander when we're in the middle of the physical and material? It wanders into spirituality. It's very simple. It requires intent. It requires mindfulness. It requires getting involved in some more Jewish meditation. All right, let's go to exercise 5.1, page 152. We're asked a very simple question here. The question is, jot down your preferred food for each of the following. Breakfast. What is your preferred food to eat for breakfast? Then we have a dinner. I don't know why it says dinner date, but dinner. Right? You have the opportunity, you're going out for dinner. What is your ideal food that you're going to have for dinner? Number 3 is for a snack. Right? What is the ideal snack that you would like? Maybe you're on a road trip, you need some snacks for the car. What would you prefer? What about comfort food? We all have been there. We've all been in that circumstance where we're in a mood and we need food. We need food, not because we're hungry, but because of the comfort that that food is going to bring. What is your comfort food that has the ability to just make you feel good when you need it? And finally, what is your favorite dessert? Of all or any desserts that might be available to you, what is it that you prefer the most? So this is part 1 of the exercise. Hopefully you wrote down your answers and your mouth is watering a little bit. We go to part 2 of the exercise. You are stuck on a deserted island without a clue as to when you might be rescued. Identify the one food that you want to have with you. To put this in another way, you are going to be trapped on a desert island for 1 year. You are allowed to bring with you one food item and one food item only. For 365 days, that will be your breakfast, that will be your lunch, that will be your supper, that's your snack, that's your comfort food, that's your dessert. One food item. What would you bring? Okay. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to think about it, and then I'm going to call on some of you to give me your response. Only one food available to you for the entire duration while you're trapped on the island. Right, Craig, you're a very thoughtful person. What food item would you bring for the year?
I would bring some kind of a stew so that I have vegetables and protein.
There you go. All right, a stew. We have vegetables and we have protein. Fabulous answer. All right, Phil, what do you think? What would you bring, one food that you're going to be able to eat for the whole year?
You know, I put down there because I like it so much and it's filling. I would just make sure I have a supply of bananas to eat.
There we go. Okay, bananas. Right, there's definitely some reason, there's definitely some logic to wanting to bring bananas. Now, I asked you the question. Did either of you on your list of your foods, right, your preferred foods, breakfast, dinner, snack, comfort food, desserts, Craig, did you write down stew as one of them? And Phil, did you write down bananas? I can't hear you, Craig, but it looks like you're saying no.
I wrote down apples instead of bananas.
Okay, wrote down apples. I'm guessing that most of you did not write down the same food if you could only have one versus the others 5. Now, it could be that maybe one of you did match, but the reality is that the foods are not going to be the same. Why? Because what we want to eat is not the same as what we need to eat, right? What our body needs to eat, especially if that's the only food we're going to eat to be able to survive that time. When it comes to eating on a regular basis, right, most of our food choices are at least somewhat dependent on pleasure, taste, flavor, things of that nature. We're focused very often more on what you would call the external, the more selfish elements of the body. Right? That's what we're looking for when it comes to eat. Now, I can relate to this struggle majorly. Right? When I was growing up, my mother knew if she made any baked goods, they were going to disappear. If she wanted those baked goods to survive until the desired moments, it had to be hidden. I found all the hiding places. So what she started to do is put them in the freezer. She'd make a cake for Shabbos, she'd put it in the freezer. I would find it in the freezer, right? There are many cakes I enjoy frozen. They taste fabulous. So I can definitely relate to the struggle with looking at food from the perspective of the taste, right? The flavor, and ultimately the pleasure that it's going to bring. But what does Judaism challenge us to do? Judaism challenges us to elevate the eating experience. Because after all, when we are eating, there is divine energy that is flowing within that food at every single moment, at every single second. And when we pay attention to the divine energy that is in that food and the divine potential that is in that eating, you know what's going to happen? Your entire experience of eating will be transformed practically, emotionally, and spiritually. So we're going to go through this for eating, for sleeping, and for work. How meditating, focusing on the idea that there's divine energy within everything and at every moment, it will transform it practically, emotionally, and spiritually. When it comes to food, what do we do that helps us transform the experience practically, emotionally, and spiritually? It's the idea of making a bracha, making a blessing before we eat. That puts us in the right mindset and the right frame of mind to elevate the experience of eating. So first, let's begin. What is the practical shift that is going to be in our thinking as a result of recognizing the divine energy within everything? So first of all, when we recognize that there is divine energy in everything that we're eating, which means that there is purpose for everything that we're eating, this is going to help control our consumption of foods. There is a purpose to eating. We are eating to live. It's not the other way around, correct? Without meditation, without thinking about the idea that there's divine energy in food, we eat because we can. If I was the person making the PowerPoint, I probably would have phrased this a little bit different. We eat, right, because we enjoy it, right? We eat because we love it. Thankfully, we don't live in a place where we're starving, right? Most of the time we're eating, it's because of enjoyment, right? The food is there. The food is available to us. But what do we have to remember? Right? We have to remember that we're eating to live, right? Not the other way around. As we discussed in one of the previous lessons, the soul, right, is the most valuable thing that we have. We have to remember that the body serves the soul. Again, not the other way around. When we are mindful that the reason that we're eating, right, is in order to be able to survive, when our eating becomes intentional, the result is going to be that we're making healthier choices. So from a very simple, practical perspective, contemplating the divine energy within the food, right, causes us to recognize, right, that it is the soul that's the most important, not the body, and that the reason that we're eating the food, right, is in order to give ourselves life. On a practical level, we're going to be much more intentional with what we're eating, and we're going to make healthy choices. Because when we know why we're eating, that's going to have a big effect on what it is that we're going to eat. That's a practical shift. Now let's go to the emotional shift that takes place when we think about the fact that there's divine energy within everything and in every moment. So number one, we realize that the food did not magically materialize on our plates. We don't have one of those machines from Star Trek where you press a button and all of a sudden any food that you want suddenly materializes. Any food that we have, it is a product of an incredible partnership between both man and God. The food that we eat, it came from a farmer, perhaps to a factory, to a store. There are so many steps along the way. Each and every single one of those steps, how was it possible to be able to happen? There was divine energy and intentionality giving life and sustaining every single step of the way. So when we are mindful of the divine energy that's in the food that we eat, we recognize where our food really comes from. Our food has so many steps there are so many steps for the food in order for that food to be able to come to us. When we feel this divine energy inside the bread that we're holding in our hands, we realize that it's a product that has so much human and divine input to make it happen. The result is going to be profound gratitude, tremendous gratitude for this food to arrive at my plates. Do you know how many years went into making that food? From that plot of land being plowed, planted, watered, harvested, packaged, mixed with other ingredients, in a truck to a store, etc. The amount of manpower and the amount of divine energy that went into making this, unbelievable. What is the feeling? Profound gratitude. You like bread, a slice of bread. Go make bread from scratch. Now, I don't mean make it from scratch as in take flour from your drawer. Make the flour, right? Grow the wheat, grind the wheat, get the water. That's what it means. Right? Think about everything that went into it. From man and from God working together, you're going to have unbelievable gratitude. Now we're not just eating, but we are connecting to a much larger story. And it's this meditation that plays a critical role in how we are meant to eat the bread. Craig, would you like to read text number 3 from the Tours Code of Jewish Law, page 153?
You can't hear me. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay, good.
Yep.
All right. Text 3. Before reciting the blessing over bread, put both your hands on the bread, for your 10 fingers reflect the 10 mitzvot associated with bread making. They are to avoid plowing with 2 species of animals together, to avoid growing forbidden mixtures of plant species, to leave, I don't know the words, laket, shikach, and peah.
Close enough, yep.
Thank you. 3 distinct forms of overlooked harvest for the poor to collect, to bring the first fruit, bikurim, to Jerusalem, to donate the teruma, tithe, to a kohen, to observe the rites of the ma'asar rishon and ma'asar sheni, tithes, and to donate a portion of dough, challah, to a kohen.
I don't know if you've ever noticed, and you should definitely notice it the next time you are Friday night at my house, Rabbi Remi's house, Rabbi Levi's house, when we make the bracha on the bread. So first we make a little slice on the bread, put the knife down, then we pick up the bread in both of our hands. We put both of our hands on it. Why are we doing this? Not because we want to get a good grip on it, right? In case we need to throw a spiral across the table, right? That's not the reason, right? It's in recognition that it is not physical material bread that we're eating. There's a profound spiritual component, and our 10 fingers represent the 10 mitzvahs that went into making that bread, right? It's a brief meditation. There's intentionality that's coming into it. There's a mindfulness that's there, right? There's this profound sense of gratitude and appreciation, the blessing, and putting our hands on that bread. So we honor that element in the bread with mindfulness and gratitude. All right, so we did practical, emotional. Now let's move on to the spiritual. So when we focus on the fact that there's divine energy, right, within the food that we are eating, what do we come to recognize? Right. We come to recognize that we know, of course, from a scientific, physical, biological perspective, when we eat food, it is going to provide energy for the body. However, what does Jewish mysticism say? What does Kabbalah teach? That food not only nourishes the body, but food absolutely energizes and nourishes the soul. That means just as food contains within it physical properties, vitamins, minerals, nutrients, that at a concrete, factual, biological level actually nourish, sustain, and energize the body, in exactly the same way, the food has spiritual vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, and those provide nourishment, energy, vitality to the soul as well. However, there's a huge difference between the delivery system of the physical nourishment versus the spiritual nourishment. Physical nutrition does not require any intentions. If you have a salad, the vitamins and the nutrients will automatically be absorbed in your body, whether you know it or not. If you somehow thought that that salad was cotton candy, makes no difference, right? It makes no difference. The nutrients are in your body. However, when it comes to extracting the spiritual nutrition from the food, your intention is critical. It is only through your intention that you actually can extract the nutrition from that food that you eat. The right intentions allows you to tap into the spiritual energy that's in the food and release it into your body. Let's go to text number 4a, a beautiful text here from the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, as he discusses this idea. Phil, if you could please read text number 4a, please. Page 154, text number 4a.
When God declared, let the earth give forth living souls, or let the earth produce vegetation and fruit trees, those very words created everything. And those same utterances continue to function as the inner life of that which was created through them. When we take a fruit or a food and recite a blessing over it with proper intent, articulating the words, blessed are you, God, mentioning God's sacred name, the spiritual energy responsible for bringing that fruit to existence is activated. This occurs because everything was created through the divine name. In our articulation of God's name, and the blessing awakens the divine energy that flows from God's name within the fruit. Then the awakened energy within the fruit provides spiritual sustenance for our own soul. This can only work with kosher food, substances that God himself directed us to sublimate from mundane to divine. This is the deeper significance of the verse. Know that a person does not live by bread alone, but rather by whatever comes forth from the mouth of God does a person live. It is not the physical bread alone that supports life. Rather, when we utter God's name and a blessing and activate the spiritual energy, that is what gives life to a person, or more precisely to the soul that animates us.
This is truly an incredible text, which gives us so much insight into what takes place when we're eating. So when we're eating, two things are being accomplished. One thing is the body is energized by the physical calories that we're actually eating. The second thing that takes place is that the soul is being energized by the divine force, the divine energy that's in the food. But this leads us to a question, which is, why is it that God created the world in such a way that we need to eat? Why is that so important that we need to eat? There are a lot of important things that we do on a daily basis. If we did not have the need to eat, and we would have our full energy and full nutrition, God could have arranged the world that way. God could have organized the world in such a fashion. Why did God create the world in such a way that the body needs to eat? It's not so we can have ice cream, right, and dessert. It's in order that the body will be nourished by the soul. by the divine spark, by the divine energy. That's the real purpose of eating. The real purpose of eating is to provide us with a spiritual experience in the world. We are at where we are able to transform the physical into the material. There is a very lofty, holy, profound, divine spark in the food that we are eating, and that food will energize our soul. When we eat that food with intention, we are extracting that divine spark from the food, entering into our body and energizing our soul. And the Baal Shem Tov then tells us something incredibly profound. He says, why does a person get physically hungry? Why does a person crave a particular food? He says the answer is because we're spiritually hungry. And the divine spark within that food is calling out to us. The Baal Shem Tov says that craving that we have for food, it's not the body that's hungry. It's the godly spark that's screaming to be redeemed. Text number 4b. Stephanie, please. On page 157, the top of the page, again, from the Baal Shem Tov.
Great, in English. An analogy. A king once lost a precious gem and wished his beloved son to have the great honor of being the one to successfully locate the gem. In truth, the gem was not lost. The king knew where it had been concealed, but engineered the ploy to give his beloved son the opportunity of earning it. The king also wanted the distinct pleasure of witnessing his son's hard-earned success. The king went so far as to drop his son a hint as to where the stone could be found. The analogy is clear. The entire purpose for which God created this world is to enable us to retrieve the divine sparks that are lost within materiality. For we are empowered to sublimate all kosher and permissible food items. On this theme, the Baal Shem Tov revealed a fascinating mystical truth embedded in the verse, hungry as well as thirsty, their soul enwraps itself in them. These words come to answer the question, why did God create us with a craving for food and make our survival dependent on eating? The answer is that there are divine sparks trapped in material entities. These sparks long to cleave to holiness. They call out for assistance, and our souls hear their call and respond to their plight. Whenever we eat or drink, we sublimate the divine sparks in the food or drink that have called out to us to achieve spiritual elevation through us. Thus, the mystical meaning of the verse is this: hungry as well as thirsty. Why do we experience hunger or thirst? Their soul enwraps itself in them because the soul or divine spark is trapped within them, the food, in a state of exile and seeks liberation. God leaves hints for the Jewish people, indicating the various ways through which we will discover the lost entities or divine sparks and return them to their rightful owner, our Father in heaven.
The Baal Shem Tov tells a story that he was once traveling in Ukraine, and he arrived in the town of Kolomaya, Ukraine. It's in the western region of Ukraine. Hopefully one of the areas of Ukraine today which is more safe, because I've heard that people are fleeing to the western area of Ukraine. It's Friday night, and the Baal Shem Tov senses a most profound spiritual energy. Says there's a holiness that is coming from somewhere in this town. I have to seek it out. Like a magnet, the Baal Shem Tov is drawn to it. And he arrives in the house of Rabbi Yaakov Koppel. He walks in the front door and he sees Rabbi Yaakov Koppel singing and dancing in front of a Shabbos table. His family is there, guests are there, all the Shabbos food is there, and Yaakov Koppel is singing and dancing. And the Baal Shem Tov says to Rabbi Yaakov, what is the cause for the rejoicing, the dancing, the excitement? So Rabbi Yaakov says to Baal Shem Tov, I'll tell you. Before I sit down to eat, I visualize, I picture in my mind the divine energy that is coursing through the food, the divine sparks which are in the food, and that through eating them will become a part of me, which will energize me, will be nourishing me. It's not about feeding the body, it's not about feeding the soul. And when I do that, it excites me, it moves me to the extent that I literally sing and dance due to the most profound spiritual experience that I'm about to have, as my soul is going to be truly and most really, that's not a word, but nourished by the spiritual energy that's in the food. Incredible story. When we have intention when we eat, when we make that blessing before we eat, we are radically transforming the experience. On a practical level, we'll probably make better food choices, we'll eat healthier. On an emotional level, we'll be infused with a sense of connection, gratitude, appreciation to all those who brought that food to us, the people and God. And from a spiritual perspective, right, we're going to tap into the soul of the food, free those divine sparks, and allow our soul to be energized. And this process, by the way, of enjoying your food allows you to be a cosmic hero, because you are not just releasing the divine energy within the bite of food that you've eaten so far, but rather you are elevating the entire process, right? The entire experience from the farm to the factory, to the truck, to the people working. Every step of the way becomes elevated retroactively, so to speak, when you make that blessing, when you make that bracha before you eat that food. Right? Any questions and comments on section number 1 of tonight's class of eating? Yes, Debbie.
Yeah, so with children, I always found it challenging teaching children. I guess if you're immersed in it so much, how do children respond to that? Do you need to explain it? I just was curious. That pause before eating.
I think children respond beautifully to this idea, and that children are taught about making brachas at a very early age, and they're taught why they make the bracha and what the effect of making that bracha is. So I think children are absolutely very receptive to the idea. This is something that I think kids can absolutely relate to. And yeah, it's definitely a part of the education process of kids.
Is it, if you tell them why, more effective? Is that true? Because I always found it challenging, even at the Shabbat table, with kids wanting to just right away eat and not worry about the blessings.
The earlier you teach kids how to make blessings,
Yeah.
the more it's going to be a part of your life. So if a person tries to begin with a 13-year-old, right, no dessert if you don't make a bracha, it might feel like a punishment, right? It might feel like a challenge. But if from the youngest age, this is part of your experience of eating, it becomes very natural. And
I guess if it's daily too,
Yep.
If it's daily.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, let's talk about sleep. For many of us, that's really the only thing we can do is talk about it, because we really don't get that much of it. I don't know about your experience, but that certainly tends to be mine. But with everything that we've been talking about, that there is divine energy within everything, right? We know that there is divine energy with sleep as well. All right. Without meditation, why do we sleep? Our body is tired. It demands sleep in order that we can be rested, in order that we're going to be able to function on a deeper level. But of course, we know there's so much more to it than that. We are going to do a little meditation on the fact that within everything, there's divine energy. Within every moment, there's divine energy. That is going to shift the way that we look at and view sleep, practically, emotionally, as well as spiritually. Now, I want to begin with this question. If you could take a magic pill and you would no longer require any sleep, this is a pill made out of a special type of coffee. I don't know what it would be made out of, but it is a pill that you could take. You would not be tired. You would have full of energy. The concept of sleep would be erased. it would be non-existent, it would not be relevant to you. Would you do that? Phil, would you do that?
I would be very skeptical of the healthiness of that pill.
Well, I understand the skepticism, but being that we're in, I guess, fantasy land, so therefore this pill has every health benefit. You will be awake, you're energized, you're nourished on every possible level. Zero health side effects. Do you think you might be more productive, more hours in the day? I mean, is this at least on some level have some appeal to you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it would allow me to devote time away from work that I need to do. For example, it would allow me to take care of my body a little bit better than because I run out of time during the day to do that. So there's a lot of things that you could take advantage of. But you know, on the other side of the coin, resting is actually very good for the soul, very good for the spirit, and very good as a way to connect and rest your thoughts from the rigors of work. So it's a double-edged sword.
So the potential benefits of not needing sleep, right, are certainly obvious. Now, God created us in such a way that we actually need sleep. The fundamental principle of this class is that there is divine energy within every single thing and within every single moment. So the fact that God created us with the need to sleep, that means that there must be something which is so unique and positive and purposeful within our need to sleep that God created us in this way. So we are going to learn how sleep is positive, it's purposeful, practically, emotionally, and spiritually. First, on a practical level, if we did not have sleep, if there was no concept of sleep, every day would essentially be one long run-on day. Have you ever read a sentence that was a run-on sentence? And it's like, I don't know what's happening here. This sentence is never ending. That is exactly how our day would feel. It would just be run on, never ending, which means we would not have the opportunity for radical change. We will always be stuck where we are because everything is essentially one long stretch. What does sleep provide us an opportunity to do? We get to turn it off, and then we get to turn it back on again. Refreshed, renewed, re-energized. When it's just one run on long, hour after hour, day after day, the same, it's never going to work. It's never going to function. The concept of sleep allows us to recognize and internalize the idea. Tomorrow is a new day, right? I can make a fresh start. I can accomplish new things. This break in the action is so critical and so vital for realizing no matter what happened yesterday, yesterday is yesterday, today is today. It's a new day, it's a new time, it's a new moment, and I can accomplish. Sleep allows us to actually feel this in a real concrete way. It's not a philosophy, it's not an idea, it's not a meditation. The fact that we need sleep and have to shut down, we can feel this in the most real way. And this is something we recite in our daily prayers every single day. Text number 7. Debbie, please. On page 163, text number 7.
Yes. Okay. It is customary to recite the blessing of Asher Yatzar each morning because at the start of each day, we are like freshly created beings. It is therefore appropriate to praise God daily for having created humans with his wisdom.
I don't know if you've ever like watched a movie that was 2 hours long, maybe 2.5 hours long, and you felt it was a little bit long, but maybe it was entertaining enough to keep you up. But what about 3.5 hours, right? 4 hours. At some point, you are going to say, at some point, this has to end. It's just too long. You can't take it anymore, right? The concept of sleep, right? You wake up every morning fresh, new, energized. It's not just this monotonous, ongoing activity. So when we are mindful of our sleep, right? We sleep to be recharged. When we say Moda'ani in the morning, right? We are thanking God for that fresh start. So on a very practical level, the fact that we need sleep allows us to have a break in that action and to truly experience the new day as something fresh with a completely new energy. All right, what about on an emotional level? How does focusing on the divine energy within everything and within sleep affect us on an emotional level? So first of all, it tells us that sleep has a purpose, which means not only do we wake up with the right mindset, but we also go to sleep with a healthy mindset. What do I mean by that? When we go to sleep, right, we are returning our soul to God on some level. That's what's taking place. This is an opportune time for reflection. If I am returning my soul to God on some level, in what shape and in what condition am I sending my soul back to God? Do you want to go to bed with anger, with resentment, with anxiety, with frustration on your heart? Do you want to return your soul to God with unfinished business looming? No. Instead, when you focus, you can take this opportunity to reflect and to let it go. A person can go to sleep with intention, with purpose. I'm not just refreshing my body, which is physically exhausted. I'm also going to refresh my soul, right? The emotional exhaustion that I experience. This is an opportunity to reflect on the day, let go of the emotional baggage, the emotional burden, and to refresh yourself as well. This completely transforms sleep to be an emotionally therapeutic experience. I'm going to bed, I'm putting to bed the anger, the frustration, the jealousy, etc., that we may have experienced during the day. And the Zohar makes this exact point in text number 8. Craig, would you like to read text number 8?
So I'm struggling with my technology here.
We hear you, it's good.
Okay. Here we go. Before lying down to sleep each night, we should take stock of our deeds throughout that day. We should repent for whatever we did wrong and ask God for compassionate forgiveness.
So the Zohar tells us that what is going to sleep about? It is a time to press pause. We know that physically it's a time to press pause, but that pause gives us an opportunity to take stock, and that ultimately allows us to let go of whatever toxicity we may have felt and experienced during the day. So there's such a practical benefit to sleep. There's a tremendous emotional benefit to sleep. And now, as we're going to see, there's such a spiritual benefit to sleep. Right? What does that mean? Just as going to sleep is refreshing for the body, going to sleep is also refreshing for the soul. During the day, your soul is overpowered by the body, right? It's covered up by the body. It's trapped in the body. But at night, a bit of the soul is able to experience an elevation. It's able to leave the body, reconnect, and recharge, and to plug right in. Let's go to text number 9. Phil, could you read text number 9, please? This is from the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe.
Okay. Text 9, page 164. Our sages instituted the practice of reciting the verse, I deposit my spirit into your hand, from Psalms 31, verse 6, each night before going to sleep, just after reciting the bedtime Shema. We should meditate on the idea that we are depositing our souls as if on loan, and to consider to whom we are providing the deposit. Our souls then draw life from on high, that is spiritual life.
So the same way that our body can become physically exhausted, which makes it a challenge and difficult for us to function appropriately, our soul can be spiritually exhausted as well. And when a person approaches sleep in the appropriate fashion, you recognize the value that it brings, not just to the body, but to the soul, as the soul has an opportunity to be recharged and to be refreshed as well. So yes, at the end of the day, a person can collapse out of exhaustion into bed. And yes, when you wake up, your body will be refreshed, but you will be missing out, right? You will absolutely be missing out. You're not going to be maximizing the tremendous opportunity which sleep presents to us on a practical, emotional, and on a spiritual level. At this point of the class, I would like to show a meditation. So I've mentioned to you that you could go to the website. There's a bunch of meditations. So Rabbi Dr. Label Wolf, we have not showed them in any of the classes. I would like to show one of them now. So so please enjoy this meditation, and we'll get right back to the class. Oh, in a second.
Such a mystery, falling asleep, that absolutely beautiful transition as you move from consciousness into some state of subconsciousness. And what you're doing is allowing yourself to move upwards, wander your soul in higher realms where it is energized for the next morning. Gently close your eyes. And just become aware of waves rolling in from the sea. Observe one wave as it finally lands on the shoreline, losing its form, its last gasp, with its wetness extending, and then the excess gently rolling back into the sea. The cycle of a wave, the cycle of life. Are you aware of the moment of falling asleep, when the wave loses its form and spreads on the shoreline? Do you prepare yourself for the journey of your soul at night, when the soul rises to higher realms, enjoying a tutorial to further enlighten it, give it peace and rest, to become refreshed by morning time? Do you have complete trust in your sleep state? Do you willingly allow your soul to travel on high? That state of trust, bitachon, is so necessary for a good night's sleep. Biyodoi afkid ruchi. I deposit my soul in God's hands. The soul has been given to me by the manufacturer with a warranty, and that warranty includes nightly gain, improvement, refreshment. And that's why I sleep. Prepare yourself before you go to sleep to have a state of confidence that the journey will allow you to be a better you next morning. Say the Shema before you go to sleep to create that sense of absolute confidence as you deposit your soul on high. By doing so, the depth of your sleep allows the soul's return to be one that brings you strength and confidence the next morning. Prepare for a good sleep. Be confident in elevating your soul and allow the next day to be a day of further growth and the soul's pathway through the body to reach out and make the world a much better place.
I hope that you found that meditation to be useful and meaningful. And there's the link that I show at the end of each lesson, where for every lesson, there's 2, sometimes even 3 fabulous meditations by Rabbi Dr. Leibowolf. So we have discussed discovering God in the kitchen, in the bedroom. Now let's move on to the boardroom. So our work life, right, represents some of the most mundane moments in life. Now, that doesn't mean bad. That's not an insult. For most people, their job does not include prayer, right? Does not necessarily include mitzvahs. For many people, gotta get out of this here. Okay. For many people, going to work on a Monday might bring along this Monday face with it. However, when we recognize the fundamental principle of this course, as I've mentioned probably 24 times already today, there is divine energy within everything. There's divine energy within every moment. That means your work life, your profession, the business, whatever it is that you do to make a living, can be experienced as a most divine and holy experience. We're going to walk you through a meditation, which will shift how we experience work on a practical level, on an emotional level, and then on a spiritual level. We begin with exercise 5.3. It is on page 165 with a very simple question: why do you work? It gives 4 opportunities to answer because there may be 4 different answers. Stephanie, would you like to suggest 2? What are 2 potential motivations that you might have to work?
Well, for me, I work to make a difference, and I work to help provide for my family. I think those would be like the 2 main reasons that I work.
Those are 2 very fabulous reasons to work. Part 2 of the exercise: if you won the lottery jackpot tomorrow, $175 million. Now, I don't know if that's the actual jackpot, but it sounds like a pretty decent number. You would never have to worry about making a living again. Would you choose to work nonetheless? I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Would you do the same job that you're doing right now, and what value do you place in it? From a general perspective, If you did not need that money to pay your bills, would you still go to work?
I would.
All right, Phil, you're going to work? Craig?
I would work, but I would work a different job. I would work about how to use the money to help my community and Jewish causes.
Sounds great, right? I think you guys are definitely in a very healthy place, right, when it comes to work. But for so many people, maybe they don't have such a healthy relationship to work. They might view it as a necessary evil. It's part of life. I have to make a living. So therefore, of course, a person will choose a profession that at least they find to be enjoyable on some level. Maybe even a profession that's actually making a difference. But if they didn't have to do it, they would not necessarily still do it, even if it's one that they find to be meaningful. Or at least they wouldn't do it for the same amount of hours and in the same amount of ways. But as we are discussing, everything has divine energy, every moment, every single thing. So even within the work that we do, there's absolutely ways to make it so unbelievable and meaningful. So first, on a practical level, the Torah is very, very pro-work. The Torah is so pro-work, not just because it's an honor for a person to be able to provide and give for their family, but it's actually a mitzvah to work. Mitchell Spector, text number 11, page 167, please. If you could unmute yourself, there you go.
Love work, do not despise it. Just as God gave us the Torah along with the divine covenant regarding its observance, so did God give us a covenant regarding our mundane work. The Torah states, 6 days you shall work and perform all your labor, and the 7th day is Sabbath to God.
So the same way that we are commanded by God to have Shabbos, the same way that is the most holy, spiritual, and beautiful mitzvah to experience Shabbos by not working, it is equally a mitzvah for the 6 days of the week to work. So it would not matter whether you had money in the bank, whether you won the lottery or not. The idea of working is a privilege, it's an honor, it's a holy activity, it's absolutely a mitzvah. So on a practical level, being aware of the divine energy within everything that we do and that it's a mitzvah has a practical impact of whether you're going to get out of bed in the morning and what you're going to do if you had all the money in the world in your bank, right? Elon Musk should still go to work tomorrow, right? Jeff Bezos too. And the truth is we probably need them more than they need us, but that's another story. What about an emotional perspective? When we think about, right, the divine energy that's invested in everything we do, we recognize that work is not merely something pragmatic that we do in order to survive, in order to pay the bills, but it does something else, right? It fills us up emotionally, right? All right, the PowerPoint is getting a little ahead of me at the moment. When a person works, you feel good. When you are contributing something to the world, when you are doing something that's productive every day, when you have a reason to get out of bed, you feel like a mensch. This is how people are wired. Let's go to text number 12. Stephanie, maybe? I can't remember who up to. Stephanie, want to read text number 12 on page 168?
Sure. A person prefers a single measure of their own labor rather than a gift of 9 measures of someone else's labor. It is dearer to the person because they have worked hard for it. Rashi.
Now, on the surface of it, if you'd ask the person, what would you prefer to have? $1 million or $100,000? I think most people would prefer to have the $1 million. However, history has shown that what would a person prefer? To work hard on your own, build a business, build a career in which you earn $100,000, or to just be gifted out of the blue $1 million? Honestly, most people would prefer the $100,000 that they earned, that they worked for, that they created, and that they developed. Why are people wired this way? For a very simple reason. The Torah tells us we are created in the image of God. What is God? God is the ultimate creator. Therefore, every person as well, in order to really feel productive, purposeful, we have to be doing something. So from an emotional perspective, work is vital, work is critical, and it's in work where we have the ability to reflect the image of God, the image that we are created in. Now let's move on to the spiritual perspective. There's a much deeper dimension to work than just the fact that it's a mitzvah, and that from an emotional perspective, being a working, productive person is important. There's a profound spiritual opportunity when it comes to work, because the work and business environment, now, again, this might not apply to every single work environment, but in a general sense, the business world is a world where people lie, cheat, and steal in order to do anything to get ahead. Because the goal of most jobs is to earn a living, it can often be dominated by selfishness and abject materialism. Now, I will grant you that it does not necessarily apply to every single job, every single career, every single business that you do. But on some level, whatever you do for a living is going to be affected by the bottom line, which is the dollars that you need to bring home ultimately to your family. We have the ability to elevate that place. A place which on the surface is so spiritual, we have the ability to make selfless. By, of course, working honestly, ethically, mindfully, spiritually, we could bring all of that holiness to what can be considered to be perhaps one of the most least holy places. And as we're going to discuss, bringing holiness to the workplace, the place where we spend so much time, that is the very purpose that we exist, right? That's the very purpose of our lives. Text number 13, Debbie Orman, please. Bottom of 168.
Okay, yes. Working faithfully. Rava taught, when we depart this world and must face heaven's judgment, each of us is asked, did you conduct business faithfully? Did you designate times for Torah study? Did you engage in procreation? Did you long for the final redemption? Did you engage in the dialectics of Torah wisdom or attempt to extract a fresh concept from an existing one?
So after a person passes away, right, you face the heavenly tribunal, right? You stand before the divine judge and you're asked a series of questions about what you did with your life. What is the very first question that's asked? Did you conduct business faithfully? Did you bring into an area of life that is potential immorality? Did you bring into that location morality? That's why I created you. That's what the world is all about. A place of darkness, you have the ability to bring light. And an environment where people are chasing the dollar, that's the place that is in the most need of light. In text number 14, the Rebbe has such a beautiful commentary on this question. Craig, could you read text number 14, please?
The way the Talmud phrases heaven's inquiry, did you conduct business faithfully, allows for an alternative understanding. Not only does it include an inquiry regarding our honesty and integrity faithfully, but also about our spiritual approach, full of faith. Was your mundane and material work saturated with faith in God?
So the Rebbe says this doesn't just mean that when you are at work, you have the opportunity to act faithfully. But what this means is you have the opportunity to bring faith into your work. You have the opportunity to engage, whether it's meetings with your coworkers, to be inspiring, to be uplifting. You're able to recognize and see the divine providence with everything that's around you. You have the ability to give tzedakah. So everyone here is familiar with the idea of a shliach, right? The Lubavitcher Rebbe appointed people to be his representatives, right? To share Torah and mitzvahs, to reach out with love to our fellow Jews. However, the Rebbe often said that every person ultimately is a shliach, is an emissary, is a representative of God. This does not have to be your career. It's not your full-time job. No matter what you do, you have the ability to be a shliach. This past year at the International Conference of Chabad Shluchim, a businessman was one of the speakers, a businessman from Panama. And he said that in memory of his mother, who had passed away the year before, he was going to put on tefillin with people. Through his business, he interacts with a lot of people. He participates in conferences, expos that draw thousands of people. There are Jews all over the place. And he dedicated and committed himself to doing this. At these work shows and experiences, he has been able to put on tefillin with not hundreds of people, but literally thousands of people every year. Not a shliach, not a rabbi. That's not his job. Businessman. But through interacting into the business world, he recognizes the incredible spiritual potential that is there, and hundreds and thousands of Jews are able to put on tefillin, are lighting Shabbos candles, are doing mitzvahs. So we have an incredible opportunity throughout our business life and all the people that we interact with to bring spirituality and meaning to that. Right, text number 15, Phil, please.
Okay, page 170. The entire purpose of creation is to create a home for God within this material world, a realm of existence that sits at the bottom of all creation, beyond which there is no lower dimension of existence. For that reason, our primary work and the overwhelming majority of our pursuits are not in sacred matters per se, for that we would be similar to the spiritual service of a soul in heaven that has yet to descend to earth, or that has already departed from earth. Rather, our primary engagement is to engage with mundane and material entities. As the Torah instructs us, 6 years shall you sow your field, indicating that we should introduce holiness and divinity even to the soil of a field, the lowest dimension of existence, thereby creating a home for God in the lowest of realms.
And through this, as the Rebbe writes, we actually fulfill the very purpose of creation, because through our engagement and work, we have the ability to have the furthest reach, to impact the most amount of people and cover the largest amount of territory. All of this results from meditating, contemplating, recognizing that there is divine energy in everything and in every moment of life. When we apply this meditation to our work life, it becomes so much more meaningful, practically, emotionally, and spiritually. Okay, so let's just move past this for a minute. Okay. All right. What did we do today? So number one, we applied the meditation on this fundamental principle, which by now I have said at least 3 dozen, if not 4 dozen times. There is divine energy in everything and in everything and in every moment. We applied this idea to eating, to sleeping, and working. When it comes to eating, right, when we can be conscious of the divine energy in your food, how does that transform us? Eating can be very physical, be very material, could be even a little bit hedonistic. We contemplate on the divine energy, and it can become a healthy experience for the body. It become a spiritual experience for the soul when we recognize we're feeding not just our body, but our soul as well. Sleep, right? When we sleep, we're utilizing sleep for the body and for the soul to reboot. Yes, we know that from a biological perspective, we absolutely need sleep. From a spiritual perspective, sleep can be rejuvenating, it's liberating on a practical and an emotional level, and a spiritual perspective, it's an opportunity to plug in and recharge our soul as well. And then finally, from a work perspective, we have the ability to find God in the mundane work, in the routines of every day. On the surface, work can be very materialistic. However, from a spiritual perspective, our work can be completely mission-oriented, emotionally satisfying, and in the greatest possible way, absolutely spiritually transformative. The key to all of these things is to shift our perspective, is to introduce this spiritual mindset. What does Judaism teach? There is no space that's devoid of the divine. We are commanded to know God in all of our ways. Knowing this, feeling this, internalizing this in a real practical way in everyday activities of life, have the ability to transform the ordinary to be truly, and I really mean this, absolutely extraordinary. There's a joke that, or an expression that I've often heard, that sometimes rabbis, right, they're high on Torah and mitzvahs. It's a funny way of saying it, but it's true, right? The more you internalize, you connect, and you feel with these ideas, you become high from it. You are literally energized, motivated, excited every single day. I often compare this to a sports fan. A sports fan gets so excited every pitch, every pass, every swing of the bat, every time the quarterback throws the ball, every time the ball gets shot up, it means something. And therefore you get off the edge of your seat because of what's about to take place. When we contemplate and meditate on the divine energy within everything, every moment, we're excited, we're at the edge of our seat, we're energized by the opportunities that every day presents itself, whether we're eating, whether we're sleeping, or whether we are going.
Lesson 5. Mind your business. Reframing the routine. 1. Jewish meditation is action-oriented, designed to deliver practical results in both physical and spiritual well-being. 2. Know God in all you do is a major axiom of the Jewish value system. It speaks to the notion that everything we do, not only the overtly spiritual and religious, can be an expression of godliness. 3. Eating can be transformed into a mindful spiritual act. On a simple level, this can be achieved by being conscious of the complex journey from our food's origins to our tables. Making a blessing prior to eating brings that mindfulness into focus. 4. On a deeper level, all food possesses divine energy. Being conscious of that and eating only for positive purposes allows us to release that divine energy from the food and transform a mundane act into a divine experience. This too is brought into focus while reciting the blessing prior to eating. 5. Sleep is an opportunity to reboot and refresh. We can imbue it with profound significance if we take stock in the expiring day, resolve to perform better tomorrow, and use our nocturnal rejuvenation to break free of past toxicity. 6. Work is not simply a means to an end. Humans choose to work, even when they do not require the money. Rather, work satisfies a basic human need to earn our own success. With proper meditation, we can find God in the mundanity of our daily work routines.
All right. Any questions, comments, thoughts, ideas on anything we learned and discussed tonight? Yes, Phil.
In the last a narrative that we read. It references that the material world is the lowest dimension of existence. Is that widely held as, so there's nothing lower than the material world? Do we know that, or is that the general thinking? I haven't heard that concept before.
Yes, this is an idea which is repeated, I would say, multiple times in multiple locations within Jewish sources, that when it comes to existence, the only true real existence is God. Right? That's the only true real existence. So we mean is higher and lower. The higher something is, the more it reveals God. The lower something is, the more it conceals God. The nature of the physical world is that it appears to be a completely self-contained, independent entity, which totally conceals the presence of God. So therefore, the physical world which we live in is the lowest world, because it's the world which conceals to the highest level the existence of God.
Okay. And I do have one other comment.
All right.
So years ago, Rabbi Wolf visited Milwaukee, and I was delighted to attend a group meeting with him, lots of people in the room. And he took us through a meditation and talked about angels. I remember the topic, and in his calm, soothing voice, as you heard in his video. And to this day, Jackie and I, after we attended that, we went home and we had the best sleep we've ever had. And to this day, we remember that. So I value Rabbi Wolf's meditations very much. And it's more effective in person than on video, I can tell you that. But I've had personal experience, and it's absolutely wonderful.
Well, that is very gratifying to hear. And I can assure all of you that through listening to those meditations or meditating on the material that we have in the class, it absolutely does bring practical results. But you got to do it, right? You actually have to think about it, visualize it, picture it, and you have to repeat it. But when it becomes a regular part of your life, the effects are going to be fabulous, with not only one good night of sleep, but possibly even every night of sleep being fantastic. I'm just going to stop the recording. Hold on a second.